Welcome to another edition of the Magic Ladies Podcast, the podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we got a couple of things to get into. But before we get started, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers and trying to become one of the biggest Orlando Magic podcasts here on the YouTube platform. Today, very baseline episode. Don't have too much to get into, obviously, because we haven't had too many games since last episode. We haven't had any games since last episode, but just a couple of notable points that I kind of wanted to break down because I've been reading through the comment section, been reading articles, been trying my best to kind of wrap my head around this Orlando Magic team and grab some of the thoughts of Orlando Magic fans, thoughts of Orlando Magic analysts, and kind of put them all collectively into this little bank of things we can talk about over the next couple of days. Whether it's in relation to the games that the Magic play or just storylines that we need to follow in relation to the Magic as we get through the first full month of the NBA regular season. First thing that came to mind to me is this team needs another shooter desperately. We thought it was going to be Desmond Bane. There's still a chance it can be Desmond Bane. But this team desperately needs a knockdown shooter outside of Tristan da Silva. And we'll talk about Tristan da Silva in a moment. But I got to really thinking, like, who are some players that the Orlando Magic can genuinely go out and try to make a play for in order to add some real three-point shooting, right? So you have to factor in the contract itself, where the player is in the hierarchy of the roster they are on, and how available they likely are because of that hierarchy. See, because the first name that would come to mind easily, without fail, would be Malik Beasley. Man shot 40+% from beyond the arc, was a knockdown three-point shooter for the Detroit Pistons, and a big part of why they had such a breakout season last year. He is a unrestricted free agent and could be somebody that if the Orlando Magic, do a little bit of cap machinations here and there with moving guys off, they can make the money to maybe go after a guy like Malik Beasley in the free agency market, except for the part where Malik is dealing with his own personal issues right now as far as the gambling suit and everything else that's taking place on that side of the NBA front. So he's not really available, although he formally is, he's not really available for this Orlando Magic team to go after. So who are the names that come to mind that the Orlando Magic should try to target by the NBA trade deadline to add some real three-point shooting to this team? I came up with three names, and I put them in order of what I think is first realistic, what I think is a long shot, and then what I think would be the best fit overall. So realistic is Royce O'Neal of the Phoenix Suns. Shooting 41.5% from beyond the arc on 8 attempts per game so far this season. Will be considered a neutral contract at best, I think, because he's owed $10 million to $11 million over the next 2 seasons, age 34, age 35. Now, they've been without Dillon Brooks due to injury, been without Jalen Green due to injury. I think you get both of those two guys back in. Now Royce O'Neal's his role gets kind of reduced to more of, he's already kind of a spot up shooter type as it is, but now I think he gets less opportunity because you have somebody like Dillon Brooks in that rotation. You already have Grayson Allen, who's a high level 3-point shooter within that rotation. So you pair that with the fact that they already have Kaman Maluaj and they have Mark Williams, that like their front court depth is already settled to a point where Royce may become like the odd man out to a lesser degree. So he could be a really good, serviceable veteran presence at the small forward position that can bite up, let's say, 10, 15 minutes, come in, guard at a high level, shoot the three ball at a high clip, and be somebody that isn't on the team long term. So again, only signed for the next 2 seasons, and he's on a pretty lucrative contract at just barely into the double digits. Number 2 is the long shot, the guy that I think that the Orlando Magic would have to pay some kind of hefty price for, but I did come up with a relatively baseline trade package, and that's Trey Murphy III of the New Orleans Pelicans. A name that's going to come up a lot when you talk about the trade deadline, given the fact that the Pelicans have been so bad. Of course, they've won their last 2 games, but this is a team that a lot of people, including probably Pelicans fans, think are going nowhere slowly. And with that being the case, he's shooting 37% from beyond the arc so far on 7.6 attempts. The part that makes it kind of difficult when you talk about the Orlando Magic is that he is on a escalating contract. What does that mean? This season, he is owed $25 million, and over the course of the next 3 years, it can increase to upwards of $31 million. Now, financially speaking, Jonathan Isaac, Jet Howard, Tyus Jones, and a future first round pick would be enough financially to be able to get Trey Murphy III. Now, what would that do for the New Orleans Pelicans? Well, Jet Howard is an upside play at the guard position and gives them another 3-point shooter, in theory. Tyus Jones is an expiring contract and a veteran point guard who gives them somebody who can really be a real distributor at that point guard position. They don't have a real true point guard. They're kind of relying on rookie Jeremiah Fears to be this like go-to scoring guard type for them. And he's played relatively well, but isn't a true setup guard to play next to guys like Zion Williamson, Derek Queen, so on and so forth. He's a very good guard for being so youthful, but as far as being a table setter, still very raw in that department. And then Jonathan Isaac gives them more front court depth. They already have Yves Missy and Kevon Looney. Other than that, relatively weak, and their power forward position is lacking in a real way outside of Zion. So Trey Murphy III could be a great acquisition. Again, be somebody who can fill in at that 3 spot. Where he fits in terms of the Orlando Magic starting 5 is where things get a little interesting, because now you're trading for a guy who may end up coming off your bench. Franz has to start. Paolo has to start. I think that you can get away with a scenario where Jalen Suggs doesn't start. Maybe that would mean putting Desmond Bane at the 1. Maybe that would put you in a position where you play a lot more small ball and you put Jalen, Desmond Bane, Franz Wagner, Trey Murphy the third, and then you have Paolo as a small ball 4. Now you have Wendell Carter Jr. going up against second units. That's a conversation, but I think it was a long shot nonetheless. But a guy that I think is going to be a name that floats across the market for a handful of teams. And then the guy that I think is the best fit, and I think has some real likelihood to it, just because of the fact that his contract is respectable, all things considered, is a guy we've talked about throughout the summer. Actually, Malik Monk, 52% on 5 attempts per game. He signed for $18 million so far this season, and then he is owed $20 million with the player option he's owed $20 million next year, and then a player option for 2027 where he is owed $21 million. So essentially he signed this season, next season, and then becomes a potential expiring contract that following summer. Malik is not shooting at the same volume as the other 2 guys I mentioned, but he's shooting as efficiently on just slightly reduced volume to those guys. He also provides more shot creation and could be a real punch off the bench as an offensive shot creator, because he does so much more than shoots the 3. But when I put this list together, the goal was to put together a group that has a high enough shot chart, right? So I'm thinking five 3-point attempts per game or more, and shooting at least 37 or more percent, because I would be considered an elite shooter, because average to above average in today's NBA is 35 to 36%. So 37 plus would be considered good, great / elite. And so these 3 players I think are all interesting targets. You guys let me know in the comment section down below, of these 3, which one do you think would be the best fit for this Orlando Magic team? Or is there a knockdown 3-point shooter that you think this Orlando Magic team should be targeting that I did not list in this group? Next up, let's talk about a knockdown 3-point shooter who already is on the team. Tristan Da Silva, by the numbers, is actually starting to play himself into being able to get that kind of respect on this Orlando Magic squad. He's shooting 49% from the field, 41% from beyond the arc, 87% from the free throw line. He scored 15 points in 5 games this season. Last season, he only did so 10 times the entire year. He's shooting 43.8% on catch and shoot attempts from beyond the arc. That puts him on par when you match the percentage and you match the attempts per game together. That puts him on par with guys like Sam Hauser of the Boston Celtics and Sam Merrill of the Cleveland Cavaliers, two guys that you would consider to be 3-point specialists. See, Tristan da Silva has a little bit more upside than those guys because as a wing, those two are more classified as two guards. For Tristan da Silva, as a wing, he has a little bit more upside because athletically he can be a big time defender. This 3-point shot coming along is helping him in a real way, and he is much more dangerous as a slasher and off ball mover with the intention of trying to get to the basket than either of Sam Merrill or Sam Hauser. So this is a guy who has the upside of being a quote unquote knockdown 3-point shooter while still being able to be an above average defender, somebody you can trust as a backdoor cutter, things of that nature. We can get to a point where Tristan da Silva is this team's Lugens Dort. Maybe never as elite as an on-ball defender one-on-one in a phone booth, but somebody who can be a good team defender, a good help defender, and fit in that box where he positions himself to be, the Lugens Dort. You can make the argument is maybe the best, the second or third best defender on his team. I think that you could make the argument that Tristan is somewhere around the second to third best defender on the team right now. So I think if Tristan can develop himself into being essentially the Orlando Magic's Lugens Dort moving forward, that could be big for this team because they need somebody of that archetype who you can trust to be this lockdown defender and hit threes at a high clip. Again, they don't have a ton of 3-point shooting around right now, and Tristan seems to be the only player that is hyper consistent. Again, the team is shooting, I believe it's 33% as a squad right now. Like that's just not going to cut it if they want to be considered an above average, if not better defense, offense this upcoming season. Like they have to be much, much better in terms of creating offense, and that starts with being able to hit the 3 ball. Next up, let's talk about the hot seat, bro. We have to. And this is going to be a quick section because it's more of just a question, and then we're gonna move into the fan thoughts, and then we're gonna get up out of here. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being very calm, 1 being we have a lot of things in front of us, 1 being let's take our time and really breathe before we make any rash decisions, 10 being things should have been done yesterday, things are not where they need to be at, this team needs a change immediately. On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is Jamahl Mosley on the hot seat? I read a few articles that said that with the rough start that the Orlando Magic are off to, that Jamahl Mosley, there's a odds maker that has like betting odds on who the most likely coach is to be fired, most likely first coach to be fired is in the NBA, or how likely a coach is to be fired in the NBA, because every single season there's always at least one that gets moved off of due to the fact that a team underperforms. And Jamahl Mosley's moved from like 33 to 1 to like 12 to 1 after the first 2 weeks of the season. And it made me really wonder, like, okay, is this because the expectations that were set before were so high that this start is sending messages that this team is underachieving way beyond whatever was initially established? Or is it even deeper than that, where Jamahl Mosley has not just underachieved in terms of their lack of success through the first 8 games of the season, but more so, has he lost the locker room? Is there a certain element of the internal stuff that's not clicking just as much as the things that are showing or not showing on the floor on a night-to-night basis? So you guys let me know in the comment section down below, scale of 1 to 10, how badly is Jamahl Mosley on the hot seat? If I had to give you a number, I think it's a firm 6. You can't say that you feel calm about where he's sitting at right now, given the fact that this team just doesn't look like themselves. They look like they are a team that doesn't have a strong establishment of an identity. They've spoken over the last day or two about using this road trip as a chance to kind of reestablish themselves and kind of figure out the kinks of what is and isn't wrong. And I think this next set of games, these back-to-backs against the Boston Celtics, might be their chance to kind of get back on the right track. But at the same time, until we see them really put together a strong enough stretch, this team has been easily one of the most confusing basketball teams of the early portion of this NBA season, because everything that we thought was a given with this team hasn't been, and everything that we were worried about in regards to this team is still an issue. So there's still so many questions, and it makes you wonder. Yes, the actual players have a lot to do with some of these issues, but it really does make you wonder where Jamal Mosley falls in the middle of all of this and how he could be potentially hurting this team in terms of where they're trying to go versus where they currently are. So I'll be checking in the comment section to see what you guys say about that. And that might be one of the first things that we end up addressing in tomorrow's episode. Last but not least, Wendell Carter Jr. was a big topic of conversation in some of my most recent comment sections from these last past videos, and I appreciate all of you guys for responding consistently. And I want to read one comment that I think kind of just encapsulates the whole Wendell Carter Jr. experience, and this is going to be the only real comment we touch on today, and we might get into some more of the comments a little denser into the comment section next episode to round out the week, right? But this comment from Jay the Evangelist 777, thank you so much. He's been very active in my comment section. This may be the second or third video that he's been referenced in. He says the Magic need to go back to playing their pace so they can play their suffocating defense. When they try to run that fast offense, it leaves them out of control and they can't defend on a high level. Secondly, they need to get rid of Wendell Carter, because he serves absolutely no purpose on the floor these days. He can't rebound or defend on an elite level, which is pretty damn required at center. Wendell Carter fouls a lot. We need a legit starting center to anchor our defense. Okay, so a few things, because I realized that there's a lot of vitriol swirling around Wendell Carter Jr.'s name as like the biggest scapegoat so far to start out the season. And I think there's some validity to that. I would also say that when I was doing some digging to see like, okay, what would be considered an upgrade from Wendell Carter Jr., especially if you're talking about addressing things like the rebounding issue. Wendell Carter Jr. is averaging 8.4 rebounds right now. Every single center that is averaging around the same amount or more rebounds per game is a center that is either not on the market, definitively not on the market, or is going to be way worth more than what the Orlando Magic can provide. Like a center that would be really interesting is like Walker Kessler, but now with him having his season-ending injury/surgery, even if the Orlando Magic had a proper package to move to get him, they wouldn't be able to reap the fruits of their labor this season. They would have to wait until next season. They would get a reduced version of Walker, and we would have to figure out whether or not he was still the guy that he was so far this season, where he was averaging 2 to 3 blocks per game and was looking like one of the top rim protectors in the NBA again. Some of the other guys that are above Wendell that kind of fit the mold of what the Orlando Magic want, they're just not for sale. Your Rudy Gobert's and players of that ilk, the Chet Holmgrens, like those guys are just not for sale. Mark Williams, although you could say that I don't believe Mark Williams is better than Wendell Carter Jr., to be quite frank, but even if you do think he is, the Suns are not going to move Mark Williams after acquiring him. They've been playing him so much to the point that Kamal Maluach hasn't even really seen the floor like that, which you could say is a bad thing for the Suns, but also an indication that they believe so much in Mark. Just because they brought in Nick Richards as well doesn't mean they're willing to move off of him. If anything, Nick Richards might be somebody that the Suns try to see what they can get some value off of, but Nick Richards is not an upgrade from Wendell Carter Jr. If anything, internally, there's more of an upgrade from Wendell Carter Jr. to Goga Batazde than there is going from Wendell Carter Jr. to Nick Richards. So I think the question that I have is, I don't disagree with the stuff about the pace. I don't disagree about the stuff in terms of leaning into the defense. My biggest question is, who would you replace Wendell Carter Jr. with? Because I said this about the Jamal Mosley coaching situation when I was praising you guys for dropping names for if Jamal Mosley were to be fired, who are the people that we should be looking to as potential candidates for them? The same thing can be said about trading guys, right? Sure, you can move Wendell Carter Jr. and say, yeah, he's a not so great rebounder, despite the fact that he's top 25 in rebounding right now. You can say he's not a good rebounder. You can say he's not the greatest rim protector. And I would agree that he's actually a very below average rim protector for his size and skill set. But who would you who would you move who would you move him for? Who would you move him for? Who do you consider as an upgrade that the Orlando Magic can realistically, and that's the key phrase, who would you move Wendell Carter Jr. to realistically get? Because, see, the only other name I could think of, and it's not even realistic, honestly, I mean, maybe Nicholas Claxton, but I don't know if the Nets would want Nicholas Claxton. I mentioned during the summertime that a lineup where you bring in someone like Ben Simmons would be interesting to have him at that center position as this ball handler who can guard 3, 4, and 5 in open space. He can be a connector. He can help with your pace of play because he's somebody that can be a good open court dribbler. But as a rim defender, is Ben Simmons a better rim defender than Wendell Carter Jr.? I highly doubt it at this point in time. Maybe once upon a time he may have been a much better rim defender because he was so much more versatile. But I say he can guard the 3 through 5 now, but it's still within a vacuum. I would trust Wendell Carter Jr. as a rim defender, as a shot blocker, more than Ben Simmons at this point. And I think he was classified by Bleacher Report as the second best available free agent outside of Malik Beasley. If you could bring in Malik Beasley and Ben Simmons, I think that could be an interesting influx into your rotation, but then you have to figure out the minutes and everything like that. And then again, is Ben Simmons really a better fit for this team than Wendell Carter Jr.? I don't think so. Nicholas Claxton, I think, could be an interesting fit for this team, but like, is he that much better? Is he that much better than Wendell Carter Jr.? I'm personally not sure. So my two biggest questions from today's podcast as we wrap things up is, one, scale of 1 to 10, where are we on Jamal Mosley in terms of him sitting on the hot seat? 10 being he needs to be out yesterday. 1 being, let's take our time. Let's give them a couple more months of this as they try to acclimate themselves to whatever try to play style they're trying to get to, and we'll learn and move that way. And then number 2 is, you all hate Wendell Carter Jr., and I'm not saying you're wrong for not being fans of Wendell Carter Jr., but realistically, put the trade finder together. Realistically, if you wanted to move off of Wendell Carter Jr., if you could move off of him, who would you move him for that you also would deem a legitimate upgrade? I'm interested to hear what you guys say in the comment section down below. This will be something we deep dive into heavily tomorrow because I think these two questions are going to be two of the biggest pillars that shape this NBA season for the Orlando Magic. With all that being said, remember to like, comment, subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content, and hit that post notification bell so you always know we're dropping new videos. I will see you guys again tomorrow, but until then, peace.